Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jackie Scully Show. And today we have Jeffrey Goelitz with us, and I'm so excited to have him here with us today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about his background, and then we'll bring him on and ask him some questions. Jeffrey Goelitz is currently the Director of Education with HeartMath Institute as an education consultant, curriculum developer, and senior trainer who is guiding the growth of HeartMath in education. He regularly consults with education professionals, mental health specialists, parents, and teens throughout the US, Mexico, and Canada to improve youth well-being, parent-child communication, and classroom climate and performance. He has co-created numerous educational curricula and programs designed to improve social and emotional learning. Jeffrey is the co-author of Using M-Wave Technology for Children with ADHD, the College De-Stress Handbook, and Transforming Stress for Teens. He's the main contributor to a number of online programs, including the award-winning Smart Brain Wise Heart program for preteens and just released WiseHeart program for children ages 7 to 10, plus the HeartMath Adventure program for children ages 4 to 7, and the new Smart Hearts quarterly newsletter for educators and parents. During the pandemic, he helped complete a large CDC grant implementation in an urban school district with the goal of reducing youth violence. Recently, he initiated a pilot mental health program for students in 40-plus schools and youth agencies around the United States. Wow, what an amazing resume that you have there. And this is completely in my wheelhouse. I am, someone who's been in education for a long time, and I definitely think we should be promoting more mental health, emotional wellness in our kids and in our schools. So thank you so much for being here today.
My joy, Jackie. Thanks for inviting me.
So just to get us started before we talk a little bit more about your work with HeartMath Institute, just tell us a little bit about your journey, your story, how maybe you came into this work.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I also wanted to be a teacher right out of college, and I did take a job for at an upper elementary level for 5 years. But then this thing called HeartMath started way back in 1991. That's how long I've been with that organization. It was a non-profit startup, and they needed someone in education because they wanted to work with different fields, and I was a natural to fit there in this startup. And so with my colleagues, we developed a lot of stuff. We had a lot of trial and error, and we had to fit the population. Of course, there's always a moving target with schools and what their needs are. So it's been a long but very fruitful journey. And I think one of the crucial things for me is actually putting into practice the very things we talk about in our programs that we teach kids, such as self-regulation, getting along better with others, how to make more intelligent decisions rather than impulsive ones, how to treat people with more kindness, more compassion, more love, which are all, they sound rather quaint and sentimental, but they're actually kind of the hallmark of what makes us human beings, along with creativity. So I just love what I do, and that's why I'm not retired, because I get to meet interesting people every day who are doing really interesting things. So I'm so appreciative to be with you here and your listeners.
Thank you so much. And I 100% believe that those types of skills that we need to be helping our children should be the foundation of school, should be the foundation in our communities. Yeah, like you said, it can sound quaint, like love, compassion, relationship building, emotional regulation, and it doesn't seem to ever really be a focus. So we talk about this and we want to see this in kids, but we are not prioritizing it to fit into the school system, particularly like the public schools. And that's where I taught. I went through public school. I taught in public school. Maybe some private schools are doing that. Some new kind of innovative online schools are tapping into doing school a little differently. But all around, most students, like most kids, are not getting that in school. And an SEL program that maybe fits in like a lesson here or an advisory program or just a side little workshop isn't really going to cut it. And I think that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you and to talk a lot more about what you do with HeartMath Institute and really bring that to our audience so that they can learn about the HeartMath Institute, because I think we're at a tipping point.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, we're very late, where the crisis is so bad. with mental health and with kids just feeling very lost and, struggling to just even be in school and struggling to be, finding their way in their communities. And I just see a lot of lost children, and it's really sad. So I love what you're doing. So if you can just go and tell us a little bit more about your work in more detail.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like I said, we've been at it for over 3 decades. And when we first started out in the 90s, talking about the power of the heart and all that, that was just kind of dismissed by the brain scientists. And
Mm.
makes sense from where they're at. The brain is the king. But what's happened in the last couple decades is the neuroscience has opened up, meaning they've understood that you can't learn. You're not going to be in a proper place to learn if your brain and your body are not aligned. If you have trauma or you have a disability that's causing frustration, your learner readiness and your performance goes down. So the neuroscience is advanced enough such that we're having these discussions now. And the second thing that you talked about, Jackie, was mental health. That was, of course, stigmatized, pushed off to the side, put in special ed or some other category. But now, because it's so widespread, as we all know, it's trickling down into the way teachers teach.
Mm.
Maybe not at the level we're used to, but because we work with thousands of schools in a lot of different capacities, there's no one size fits all. We're seeing that the teachers are finally connecting the dots. I've got to pay attention to the well-being of students at another level and not just a cursory token gesture, but actually in some meaningful ways. So this is definitely happening in the classrooms because you can't avoid it. The mental
Mm.
health issues, what I hear almost weekly from educators is post-pandemic, our kids are more dysregulated. They're having
Yeah.
trouble focusing. They're having trouble getting along. They're having trouble staying on task. So inserting these little self-regulation strategies, and whether you go through the front door, the side door, the back door, depending on your school, depending on the policies, depending on the environments, there's so many variables that play into that. But we're seeing it not just with HeartMath, but with mindfulness, with social emotional learning, character education, advisor periods, or now it's become a necessity. I can't say it's an urgency yet
Mm.
because there's so much going on in the classroom. Time management is such a big issue. There's so much to conquer. But the more teachers value, as you would know, their own resilience, where they have some capacity to handle the challenges, to handle the long haul of being teaching and dedicating and really caring and finding some work-life balance. If there is some priority on that for teachers, then they're going to start also putting those same values into place in the classroom. Not all teachers,
Yes.
but that's starting to happen in a way that would surprise us. The other thing I'll mention, uh, schools are having to evolve in how they organize themselves
Hmm.
to meet the needs of the kids in the changing times. So public schools aren't going anywhere, and they shouldn't. They serve an incredible service, and there's a lot of dedicated people there. But some of the structures are not working. So what we're seeing, and you certainly would see it not only with magnet schools, chartered schools, or even these other kinds of small schools, is these hybrid models are emerging, where maybe it's blended learning, where you're doing part-time online, part-time with teacher. In some cases, teachers are acting more as consultants to guide students as long as they cover the basics and the academics. I'll give you one quick example. We're working with a school in Washington where there's 200 high school students. Some of them are struggling. They did not do well in the conventional school, but it's a public school. It's all based on project-based learning. They still have to do the basics. They have to meet the requirement of the academics, but it allows them to find themselves, to discover their
Mm.
passions. And they work with mentors. And I'm right now guiding someone, a student who's a senior, in such a project where they're going to study heart rate variability, which is one of our specialties, which maybe the audience doesn't know much about that. But the heart-brain connection and how if we manage our stress, it changes the signals from the heart to the brain
Mm.
and helps bring more calmness, lower stress, and increase performance. So these things are starting to emerge, and we have almost daily contact with these people that are real innovators and pioneers in their field of education. And that's why I keep working, because I get to ride this crest of innovation, not just with HeartMath, but the people I dialogue. There are some active change agents going on right now.
That's wonderful to hear. This is so positive. When I first started my first podcast, The Teacher Story, during like kind of coming out of the pandemic, it was just a lot of sad stories. And now, rebranding and bringing this into kind of this new age of where are we going into the future? How are we rebuilding, right, from this time of the pandemic? I think we were in this kind of flux for a while. And now I think really coming into 2025, we're seeing a lot of these organizations that are kind of ready to rebuild. So I love to hear that there's change agents that you're seeing in these schools. You're seeing schools, teachers, administration that have the willingness to want to take on this type of reframing their schools and working with like HeartMath Institute. I do love the science behind the brain and the heart and the connection and like talking about, ways to lower your stress, emotional regulation, and how that's all communicating. So if you can go a little bit into that, because I think this is where people are like, whenever there's science behind something, they're like,
Mhm.
sign me up. This is going to
Yeah.
work for us.
Well, just a little short story on the journey that led us there. When we launched HeartMath, there's about 40 of us, believe it or not, from different fields, and it was a jump off the cliff where we were hoping there was going to be a parachute, and it turns out there was. But we knew when we were talking about the power of the heart, and you look at the Webster's dictionary, the single first definition is it's an organ that pumps blood. Second definition is the kind of the center of who we are. That's how it's used in literature and language and going way back time for thousands of years. But we wanted to bring in science because we knew just like you're implying here, we needed credibility that
Mhm.
the heart is more than just a pump, it's more than just a quaint metaphor, but there's something throughout time that people have honored or spoken about the power of the heart. Listen to your heart, sing with your heart, that kind of stuff. So we started working with some scientists in a really talented advisory group, and we started looking at the heart-brain connection. Now, we're all used to the brain being the kingpin, as I alluded to earlier, but what we've discovered, along with many other scientists and researchers, is that the heart has a nervous system. It has dendrites.
Mm.
It has memory, not like the brain has. It even has hormones, two hormones. So it's been reclassified as an endocrine gland. So it's a new field called neurocardiology, the nervous system
Mm.
of the heart. And we study that. We study the signals going from the brain to the heart and from the heart to the brain. And it's quite intriguing. And we've seen this take off in the larger scientific field. But the real premise is that the heart, the nervous system of the heart, sends more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart.
Mm. That's interesting.
Yeah, and what we're
Yeah.
suggesting is depending on your emotional state, American Journal of Cardiology, 1995, your emotional state will affect the patterns of that neural traffic, whether it's chaotic or more ordered.
Mm.
So if you're frustrated or angry, how well are you going to make a decision? How well are you going to be in getting along with others? Or regret saying things, oh my gosh, why did I say that? We call it cortical inhibition.
Oh, yeah.
Because you
Yeah.
had chaos in your nervous system and your
Yes.
brain wasn't thinking clearly. So this is going
Mm.
back way more into the 90s. So we started developing biofeedback technology that started to measure that. Put a little ear clip on and you can measure what's called heart rate variability, which is your heart rhythms. And we started tracking that and doing research. And it's been going on for decades. There's hundreds of research studies exploring the heart-brain connection, how the neural traffic going up what's called the vagus nerve, that's the parasympathetic, and how much about 90% of the traffic going up the vagus nerve is from the body or heart up to the brain. Sympathetics down the spinal column, and this is a lot of science here. But we're looking at the balance of the two, not the elimination, because they're constantly going. And so if we're more calm or more loving or more kind, the signals going from the nervous system of the heart go to the brain, and the brain gets more clarity.
Mm.
And this has been documented time and time again. I'll just mention one last study, and then I'll move on. We collaborated with USC, and they were doing a major study using our M-Wave Pro technology, and they were working with middle-aged people, 38 to 62, healthy people. And they used the M-Wave Pro every day for, I guess it was a month, and they're tracking the neural traffic going from the heart to the brain, and they're looking at amyloid plaque.
Hmm.
It's amyloid plaque. Well, that's that sticky stuff that gets in the
Yeah.
brain that can create or cause dementia. And there was a lowering of that amyloid plaque, which is very significant. But they're talking, regardless of that, they're talking about the vagus nerve, the heart-brain traffic. So it's hit mainstream
Mm.
by a recognizable university and some public journals like that. So it's disseminating out there in a big way that our emotional state, our mental state is really important for brain health.
Hmm. Exactly. This is something I think really could be a huge part of psychiatry. I'm just thinking about like when I was teaching AP psychology and we would get to that clinical psychology unit, we still spent a lot of time on pharmaceutical, and talking about drug treatment. Not saying that that's going away. And for more severe cases, that's still a tool, it's still an aid. But I think bringing the science more to the forefront in even, again, like the clinical sense and really getting patients to look at that, like using that technology and seeing how your heart is affecting your brain. I mean, it makes sense when you talk about it. I love all the science talk, by the way, just from teaching psychology for so long. Um, but just it makes so much sense because you're lowering cortisol levels, right? You're probably providing a lot more oxygen to the brain, and that brings more clarity. Like I do a lot of deep breathing exercises, and a lot of that actually is more so kind of coming into that heart centered area, that cavity, and then bringing that to the brain. And you have a lot more oxygen going to the brain, and then you have more clarity. That's usually when I get more ideas or I'm working on a problem. After I do a breath work, exercise, I feel like, oh, an aha moment, meditation. So all these other modalities that we talk about kind of in the wellness field, but definitely could be in psychology, can be in the clinical field. You can, since it has that, science aspect. Anything else you want to share with like how you've been instituting strategies, like any details like within the schools and what you use with teachers? And I love the idea of training teachers and getting them on board because if they can also work on their own self-regulation and focus on how their own mental health is important, then they can be that mentor for their students in front of them.
Yes. Well, just a little side note. We're working extensively now with veteran administration hospitals and vets who have PTSD or addiction, and that's now been approved as a federal expense by a feedback. So it's trickling down into those clinical settings
Mm.
for thousands of vets, and that's
Wow.
going on all the time. But it's also trickling down into social workers,
Mm.
psychologists, school counselors. This is going on big time. And it's a daily conversation I have with these people. So they're starting to integrate our biofeedback, which is a user-friendly way, and it sounds rather technical and clinical, but it's just you hook it up to a laptop and put a child, whether they're 4 to 18, and they see their heart rhythms, and then they get more coherent, and there's games where the garden game goes from black and white to color. So, and because today's kids are so digital, they're
Hmm.
digital natives. Seeing is believing. Otherwise, it's rather abstract inside themselves. It's hard to connect the dots. But when they see something on the screen, then it makes sense. So that's why a lot of educators are pursuing this. I'm not being evangelical about that. This is just fact. Because it's another tool
Mm.
in their therapeutic or counseling work with students who are really distraught, who are having a lot of trouble. We know that the trauma levels are up. We know that the kids with autism who struggle greatly with anxiety and social phobias, that's up as well. Our identification tools are better, but they need more help, and they're overwhelmed because they have too many people to help. So
Mhm.
this is one tool used strategically that really, really helps. So and I'll mention one thing. There's a large Midwestern university whose name I cannot use, but they came up with what they call smart labs, where school. This is another phenomenon that's happening, where schools are starting to have a dedicated room for mental health and well-being.
Mm.
Not just HeartMath, but they might have a National Geographic movie or aromatherapy kit or
Mm.
a punching bag, as the case may be. And the kids know, whether they're in elementary or middle or high school, it's there for them if they're having a
Yeah.
meltdown or if they're struggling with some supervision, or even in classrooms. They have a well-being corner, a social emotional learning corner, a dedicated computer in the back for that when they're having a struggle. So it's seeping in,
Mm.
this clinical neuroscience stuff. It's starting to seep in, trickle down into the classrooms because it's time. There's a readiness now to adopt this. Even schools now go, yeah, we got to do something about the mental health, because again, kids are not ready to learn unless their mental health is okay.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that idea of these smart labs. And I think just having those spaces in a school where kids can take a break. I think just remembering like we are not training robots. Like the kids have a lot on their plate. They go from 7:30 sometimes if it's high school, 8, 9 till like 3, straight through pretty much. I
Yeah.
mean, constant cognitive download and activity besides maybe like a half hour lunch, which usually they're still, if they're in high school, maybe running to a club or tutoring or with, working with a teacher. And they, of course, are going to be like, "Ah, I just need to like get out some steam, or then they're dealing with social drama and their relationships and all of that, maybe things happening at home. And we often don't have any other spaces besides maybe the counselor's office. And I know we're having kind of an issue with having just enough counselors in a school. But if kids could also have agency to say, I know I'm not doing well right now. I know I can ask my teacher, can I go and use this space and however long? And teaching them that agency to take care of themselves, because as an adult, you're going to have difficult times and you're going to say, you know what, I need to remove myself and go take a breather or take a break. Otherwise, you might just then be volatile and get into arguments and create more chaos and problems in your life. So I think this is actually a really good way to teach kids how to do that and how to create maybe spaces in their own life to self-regulate. So it is time. It's way overdue. And I think post-pandemic and a lot of teachers who are still in it, fighting the good fight, they're like, this is bigger than me. Like I can't do it all. And again, if there's not enough counselors, they're like, we just need something else. So this is a great program to be putting into schools.
Well, one other thing I'll mention too, Jackie, is that there are a lot of simple, short strategies in the busy school days where you can implement something like this, whether it's an advisory period,
Mhm.
whether it's starting the day, whether it's after recess, whether it's before a test, before a collaboration. And so what we do here at HeartMath is before a meeting, we might just take 3 minutes to breathe through our hearts, to prep, and it's an important skill set. Prep much like an athlete before a larger event,
Mm.
or a musician. Leon Marchand, who you may have heard about him from the French swimmer, won 4 gold medals.
Yeah.
He practices heart coherence before events because he gets so anxious, and he's breathing in fun while he's breathing into prep to get in the right headspace like that. So again, there's a lot of little places, but the teacher has to be invested. They have to do it themselves to some degree to see the value in order to transfer it or model it with the kids. And I think the neuroscience helps there, because they call it now brain breaks or a mindful break or a pause during the day, just to gather yourself. Doesn't have to take a long time. And that kind of clears the slate a little bit to some degree. So kids are more engaged, more participatory, and you build it over time. And what you're really doing for kids is you're giving them a tool in their back pockets that they have for a lifetime. They may struggle with
Yes.
this, may struggle with this. Oh, there's this option for self-regulation. Oh, and I can do that as an adult when I'm having an argument with my spouse or not getting along with my boss. So that's where this new skill set are coming into play that are slowly, almost invisibly, starting to enter into school classrooms and school climates that are we don't hear enough about because we hear about teacher shortages and test
Yeah.
scores and all that kind of stuff. But no, it's slowly working its way. I just know firsthand that it's doing so.
Yeah. Thank you. And I like the idea of these simple strategies. You know, it's like you have the tech tool, and that could be part of it. But this would be great to have just schools doing professional development with teachers as they start the school year. So if it's something new, so getting in there in August and working with the teachers, getting them to do it for themselves, because there has to be the buy-in. And then say, this is going to be our initiative this school year. Let's start. I would love to see like starting each class because a lot of times kids, you know, I'm in the high school world, they are running from class to class. They have like 5 minutes to get to their next class. They're going from like math to English to science to gym, you know, all over the place. And they need that time, you know, like 3 minutes, just do some breathing exercises, do some regulation, put the tech away, and then just kind of like center yourself to start it. And I think it could just, those little tweaks can really make a huge difference. It also can help rapport between the students and the teacher because kids really build a sense of trust with the adult that's working with them when that adult sees them and sees them where they're at and gives them that little bit of space and time and maybe those tools to say, this will help you know, instead of like, we have to go, the bell rang, we have things to do. I need you to do this do now on the board right now. Because then you're talking to them like they're not human. You're talking to them like they're just producing something.
Right.
And I think that's what when kids now, not everywhere, but I'm seeing it more and more, they're pushing back. And then you have more behavioral, you know, concerns because they're just, they're over it. They're over even the adults that are in front of them, which they're spending more time with their teachers than sometimes their parents are not seeing them as humans. And they're on social media. It looks like the world's on fire, you know, everything. And all they want to see is an adult is seeing them as who they are and cares about them. And it could take a couple of minutes in between, you know, those classes and those little tweaks that you can do. So I love this so much. I'd love to see this in, you know, all schools. I'd love to see this in professional development that I come across. Any final words or anything you want to share about HeartMath, your work, or any thing about just school education moving forward?
Well, we are a nonprofit, so we're always looking for ways to help schools. They can reach out if you want some assistance or guidance. We do that all the time on a daily basis. But I would also say, post-election, post-pandemic, we are really in times have changed, and it's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of stress, and of course, it's all trickling down to the kids, and it affects them like that. So, really making a commitment to your own mental health and your well-being and well balanced. I know you speak a lot about that, Jackie, but carving out some prime time, whether it's the drive to work, you just breathe through your heart, try to breathe in some appreciation, but make it a regular habit because it changes what we call the baseline of your electrophysiology and
Mm,
it upgrades it. So you're a little more coherent in your body, you're a little more coherent in your heart, you're a little more coherent in your brain. That's where it really comes, and that's actually something we're really trying hard to do is create a teacher resilience online program such that
mm,
we can help them get more coherent. So it's a prime time for growth and change. There's more receptivity. The ideas are sparkling for a lot of people, even though there's overwhelm and uncertainty. But sometimes in the midst of that chaos, it's a great opportunity for change, and we're
hmm
seeing that.
Wonderful. That's a great way to end it. It is an opportunity for change, and we have a choice on what perspective we want to have. Do we want to just see everything looks like chaos and we have no control over it, or do we want to see that we can do something about it, right? And I often go back to like that internal locus of control versus external locus of control. If we're in the external locus of control, we're like, we can't do anything. The world's on fire. I don't know what's happening or
Right.
internal locus of control is I have these tools. I
Yeah.
listened to this podcast today and I learned something new. I'm going to go check out Jeff and HeartMath Institute and maybe talk about it with my principal at my school or just start to use this in my own life. And with that, I will be plugging your information in the show notes, but do you want to just share where our listeners can find you and learn more about HeartMath Institute or any other resources?
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. HeartMath.org, that's our website. And jgoelitz at heartmath.org is my email. And I'm always around. Most of the time, I travel a little bit. And would love to support you. But aside from that, I just believe in the power of education. And I just think it's a challenging time to kind of stay the long commitment, the long haul, if you will. But it's so worth it because ultimately it's a caring profession and you're making a difference in the lives of others. So it's a real noble profession. Again, that can sound really quaint and sentimental and all that, or like a big fat cliche. But what you do is very, very important. And it's good to remind yourself daily that you have a mission. You have a
Mm.
larger mission. You have to take care of yourself in order to manifest that mission on a daily basis. So I salute you for your dedication and your commitment. Thank you for your service. And thanks for having me, Jackie.
Thank you so much. And yes, in the work of education, you're really building legacy. You're building the future. So we are futurists, you're creating the generations and we want to help them be healthier adults. That actually creates a more peaceful world. And that's what we all want to see. So thank you so much, Jeff, for being on the show today. It's been such a joy.
Thank you for having me, Jackie.